The internet is absolutely losing its mind right now, and for good reason. Ned Fulmer, the disgraced former Try Guys member who became internet enemy #1 after his devastating cheating scandal, just made his grand return to the online world. And let me tell you, nobody was ready for this. We're talking about the same Ned Fulmer who destroyed his entire career, betrayed the Try Guys, and shattered his wife guy image when he got caught cheating with a coworker. The same guy who disappeared from social media for 3 whole years is now back with a podcast called Rock Bottom, and the timing couldn't be more suspicious or dramatic. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Just hours after announcing his return and revealing that his wife Ariel would be his first guest, news broke that they've actually been separated this entire time. The internet went from dragging Ariel for standing by him to completely losing their minds over this plot twist. And trust me, the reactions have been absolutely brutal.
If you want to hear all the tea about this wild comeback story, hit that subscribe button because we're about to dive deep into the chaos. And honestly, you're going to need to be subscribed to keep up with all the drama that's sure to follow. So let's start from the beginning of this mess. On September 16th, 2025, and yes, that date is extremely significant, Ned Fulmer decided to break his 3-year silence. He spoke to People magazine about his new podcast, Rock Bottom, for the first time since his infamous cheating scandal. The timing here is absolutely not a coincidence. September 16th was the exact same date that he was fired from the Try Guys back in 2022. Was this some kind of revenge move? A way to reclaim that date? Or just the most tone-deaf timing in internet history? The internet certainly had thoughts about it.
In this People magazine exclusive, Ned came out swinging with statements about feeling ready to share his story and moving into a new chapter of his life. But the internet wasn't having any of it. The comments were absolutely savage. People were writing things like, "I totally forgot to unfollow, glad to see this as a reminder," and "No one wants you back," respectfully. Others pointed out the irony that while he was trying to make a comeback, the remaining Try Guys members, whose careers he could have destroyed, were thriving without him. The announcement revealed that his new show would be called Rock Bottom, which is honestly the perfect name considering where his reputation currently sits. The concept: he'd be interviewing people who had hit rock bottom in their lives, dealing with addiction, legal issues, or cancellations, and exploring how they tried to grow and recover. The irony was not lost on anyone that the guy who became the poster child for workplace affairs and career destruction was now positioning himself as some kind of redemption story expert. But here's where the story takes its first major twist. Ned announced that his very first guest would be none other than his wife, Ariel Fulmer, the same Ariel who had been dragged through the mud during his scandal. The same woman who had to watch her husband's affair play out in public while she was also working at the company. The internet immediately started questioning why she would agree to this, calling it a humiliation ritual and begging her to stand up for herself. Now, let's quickly refresh everyone's memory about why this comeback attempt was so shocking. Back in September 2022, the Try Guys were riding high as one of YouTube's most successful groups. Ned had built his entire brand around being the wife guy, constantly talking about how much he loved Ariel, how great their marriage was, and how family always came first. So when blurry photos surfaced of him allegedly kissing Try Guys employee Alex at a New York City bar, the internet absolutely exploded. This wasn't just any affair. This was a workplace nightmare. Ned wasn't just Alex's coworker, he was her boss. They were spotted together multiple times in public, at Harry Styles concerts, and according to rumors, there were even reports of them being caught in compromising situations in cars around the neighborhood. The whole thing became viral not just because celebrities cheat, but because Ned had built his entire public persona around being devoted to his wife. Fans started noticing that Ned was being weirdly edited out of recent Try Guys videos, and the editing was so obvious, it became more suspicious than helpful. The Try Guys weren't addressing it initially, which led to even more speculation about whether they knew what was happening and were trying to protect him. But when the truth finally came out, they didn't mess around. The Try Guys dropped a video titled "What Happened" that became so viral it inspired an SNL skit. They confirmed that Ned had been in a consensual workplace relationship and was no longer with the company. Within 11 days of the incident being reported, Ned was completely removed from everything. But this came at a massive cost. Entire videos that had already been filmed and edited had to be scrapped. The remaining Try Guys lost money, content, and most importantly, a friend they thought they knew. Keith Habersberger even said it felt like going through a breakup. Eugene Lee Yang made it very clear that what happened wasn't okay, especially in a workplace setting. And he smartly pointed out how women in these situations always seem to get more backlash, which is exactly what happened to Alex. The remaining 3 Try Guys handled the situation with class, transparency, and legal precision, which only made Ned's actions look worse by comparison.
After posting a brief statement confirming the affair and saying he was working things out with his family, Ned basically vanished from the internet. He and Ariel were occasionally spotted out, still wearing their wedding rings, but for the most part, they stayed completely out of the public eye and off social media. Until now. So, when Ned announced this podcast comeback with Ariel as his first guest, people immediately started dragging her in the comments. The assumption was that she had stood by him through everything and was now helping him rehabilitate his image. Comments were flooding in, telling her she had no backbone, that she needed to stand up for herself, and questioning why she would subject herself to this kind of public humiliation again. But then came the plot twist that nobody saw coming.
Just a few hours after the People magazine interview went live, after Ned had announced his podcast and revealed Ariel would be his first guest, another bombshell dropped. It was confirmed that Ned and Ariel had actually split and were separated. According to the reports, they had separated after 15 years together. And while many assumed Ariel had stood by him indefinitely, the truth was they weren't romantically together anymore. The timing of this revelation was absolutely wild. Were they planning to reveal the separation on the podcast all along? Did they release this information early because people were dragging Ariel in the comments? Or was this always part of some calculated PR strategy? The whole thing threw everyone off because suddenly all those comments telling Ariel to leave him seemed unnecessary. She apparently already had. If you're as confused as I am about this whole timeline and want to make sure you don't miss any updates on this ongoing drama, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because honestly, this story keeps getting weirder by the day. When the first episode of Rock Bottom finally dropped, we got to hear from both Ned and Ariel about their relationship after the scandal. Ariel confirmed that they have separated, saying, "We are not together, we live separately, and that we are devoted co-parents to our 2 beautiful children." She also revealed that she decided not to return to her former podcast, You Can Sit With Us, which makes sense given everything she's been through. In the podcast episode, Ariel opened up about the moment she realized what was happening. How did I not see what was going on? What was so effed up in my brain that I couldn't actually see what was happening in this picture? She described the moment when she confronted Ned about the rumors, saying that when she looked at him, the veil just fell, and she could see the guilt written all over his face. The podcast revealed that despite their separation, they had recently taken a trip to Greece together for co-parenting purposes, which explains why people might have thought they were still romantically involved. But Ariel made it crystal clear that if people see her out and about with Ned and their kids, not to mistake it for a romantic reunion.
Throughout the episode, you could tell this was incredibly difficult for Ariel. People noted in the comments that she could barely look at him while talking about the scandal, and many questioned why she would put herself through this public conversation at all. Some called it brave, others called it unnecessary, but everyone agreed it was uncomfortable to watch. The internet's reaction to Ned's return has been overwhelmingly negative, and honestly, that shouldn't surprise anyone. Social media has been flooded with people expressing their shock that he thought this was a good idea. The comments range from simple unfollows to detailed explanations of why his comeback attempt is tone-deaf and inappropriate.
Many people pointed out that while Ned was trying to rebrand himself and make a comeback, the remaining Try Guys have been thriving. Keith, Eugene, and Zach have continued creating content, built their brands stronger than ever, and moved on from the drama completely. The contrast between their success and Ned's attempt at relevance has not been lost on fans. Others have questioned the entire concept of his podcast. The idea that someone who caused such workplace drama and personal destruction would position themselves as an expert on recovering from rock-bottom moments strikes many as hypocritical. Critics argue that he hasn't really faced consequences for his actions, and that 3 years away from the internet doesn't automatically qualify him to help others navigate their lowest moments.
But here's where the story gets even messier. Just as news of the separation was being reported, TMZ posted photos of Ned out with a new woman. The timing couldn't be more suspicious. These photos were apparently taken just last week. So while he and Ariel were preparing to sit down and discuss their separation on his podcast, he was already being spotted with someone new. This timing has led to even more speculation about the true timeline of their relationship and whether the separation announcement was rushed out to get ahead of these photos surfacing. If they had done the podcast without announcing the separation first and then these photos came out, Ariel would have been dragged through the mud all over again.
The whole situation has left people speechless and questioning Ned's judgment once again. Many are pointing out that he seems to have learned nothing from his original scandal about keeping his personal life private and being mindful of how his actions affect others, particularly Ariel. Ned admitted in his People interview that the months following the cheating scandal made him completely averse to being online, especially social media, because he didn't think it was particularly beneficial to his mental health. He also said he's learned to tune out the negative comments and focus on letting his work speak for itself. But given the overwhelmingly negative reaction to his return, it's unclear if that strategy will actually work.
The question everyone is asking is whether Ned's comeback attempt will be successful, or if this will be the only episode of his podcast that gets any real attention. Many people have stated they're only interested in hearing what Ariel has to say and have no intention of listening to future episodes featuring other guests. The concept of rock bottom could actually work as a podcast. There's definitely an audience for redemption stories and conversations about overcoming personal failures. But the problem is that many people don't believe Ned has actually hit rock bottom or learned from his mistakes. His return to the internet after only 3 years, combined with being spotted with a new woman while still married to Ariel, suggests to many that he hasn't really changed. There's also the question of whether he's qualified to help others navigate their lowest moments, when his own scandal was largely self-inflicted and involved hurting people who trusted him. The remaining Try Guys, Alex the employee he had an affair with, and most of all Ariel, were all collateral damage in his poor decision-making. That's a lot different from someone who hit rock bottom due to addiction, mental health struggles, or circumstances beyond their control. The internet's reaction suggests that most people aren't ready to forgive and forget. The comment sections are filled with people expressing that they have no interest in his perspective on recovery and growth when the people he hurt are still dealing with the aftermath of his choices. Some have pointed out that if he really wanted to make amends and show growth, there were probably better ways to do it than launching a podcast that positions him as some kind of expert on bouncing back from mistakes. Staying private, focusing on his family, and maybe doing some actual community service or behind-the-scenes work would have been more appropriate responses. But instead, he chose to thrust himself back into the spotlight, bringing Ariel along for what many see as a publicity stunt disguised as accountability. The fact that they announced their separation in such a calculated way, timing it perfectly with his podcast launch, makes the whole thing feel manufactured rather than genuine. Looking ahead, it's unclear what Ned's internet future looks like. The Rock Bottom podcast exists and will probably continue for at least a few more episodes, but whether it gains any real traction or audience beyond curiosity seekers remains to be seen. The overwhelmingly negative reaction to his return suggests that most people aren't interested in his redemption arc. For Ariel, many people are hoping this podcast appearance was her way of getting closure and that she can now move on with her life, completely separate from Ned's attempt to rebuild his public image. She's been through enough public humiliation and deserves to heal privately without being dragged into his comeback attempt.
The remaining Try Guys continue to thrive without him, which probably stings, but also proves that they made the right decision in removing him quickly and decisively. Their careers recovered because they handled the situation with integrity, while Ned's career remains in shambles because of his original poor choices and his continued questionable decision-making. So what do you think about Ned's return to the internet? Was this podcast announcement a genuine attempt at accountability and growth, or just a calculated move to try to rehabilitate his image? Do you think he's actually learned from his mistakes, or is the timing with the new woman photos proof that he hasn't changed at all?
And what about Ariel's decision to appear on the podcast? Was it brave of her to tell her side of the story, or should she have stayed completely separate from his comeback attempt? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This whole situation proves that internet scandals have long-lasting consequences and that trying to make a comeback after such a public betrayal is incredibly difficult. Whether Ned succeeds in rebuilding any kind of career or public goodwill remains to be seen, but based on the current reaction, he's got an uphill battle ahead of him. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on, because something tells me this story is far from over. With Ned back online and apparently already moving on romantically, there's probably more drama coming our way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, where we'll probably be talking about whatever messy situation unfolds next in this ongoing saga.